All right, 50 and 100 yard ballistic gel test today, 17 HMR, using Nox, 10% ballistic gelatin. Where's my BB at? There she is. Coming in at 3.4 inches penetration there on the calibration, so we are within spec. Temperature controlled, as always. Plus, it's only about 38 degrees right now. And I want to give a shout out and thanks to my buddy John at Boomstick Revenge for letting me use the range today. Go check him out. So we got some FMJ here. I found these a few years ago. I didn't see these for years and years and years since I was a kid. And then all of a sudden one day I was like, what? FMJ? How didn't you know they made FMJ? And 17 HMR. If this would ever focus, but you get the gist. Just a FMJ there. I'm thinking with these being such small, fast, light bullets that probably going to tumble when it hits, so we'll find out. Then here, 20 grain soft points. Always loved using these. They're a lot better against wind resistance than the 17 grain ballistic tips that were commonplace for the 17 HMR. Plus, out there 150, 200, these seem to hit harder, retain more energy, even though they're coming out slower due to that heavier bullet. They seem to retain more energy longer out. Your 17 grain, no, I'm sorry, that's a 20 grain FMJ. Your typical 17 grain ballistic tip, or any 17 grain, it's usually 25-50, but these are A17s, which are a little faster. I'll get to that in 1 second. So the FMJ is 20 grain. Our soft point here is a 20 grain, advertised 23.75. Obviously they're going to be a little slower because they're a little heavier than the typical 25-50 17 grain loads usually are. And by the way, they call this a soft point, but it looks like more like a hollow point, as you can see there. But there is lead. I know it's hard to see because it won't focus right. Just a millimeter or two down in there, there's a lead base, so I think that's why they're calling it a soft point. Whereas, like the TNT bullets, for example, the hollow point goes way deeper in there, but that just gives you fragmentation, which I do have a box of those. We'll have that coming up in another video. So these are the A17s. You can see here they're advertising for their A17 rifle. They're a little bit faster to ensure reliable cycling through a semi-automatic. So instead of the standard 2,550 feet per second, they advertise these at 2,650. I actually have a video on these, shooting them accurately 500 yards. Check out the 22/rimfire playlist on the channel for that and more. Anything rimfires in there, obviously. Gun reviews, other gel tests, long range videos. So that's these. Just your typical ballistic tip there, but they're advertised at a slightly higher velocity, so a little bit faster. One day I'm going to also try to compare these to the standard ballistic tip that CCI offers and Hornady with the lower velocities and whatnot, see if there's really any difference. But these things do fragment like crazy. So I'll have 2 blocks set up, even though I don't know that we'll get penetration into the second block anyway. It's now at 100. If we don't have any expansion or anything, we might. But I'll get 2 of them set up. I'll let you know the order I'm firing. We'll have a GoPro down there, so get real up close shots for you guys as well. Into the video, we'll get expanded diameter measurements if there's anything left of them to do such. We'll get penetration depths, retained weight on the bullets. But I'll get set up here. We'll start at 50 yards and then we'll do 100. And the rifle I'm using today is my Savage 93 R17. I'll put a link in the description to the original review video of this rifle if you want to check that out. Alright, set up at 50 yards there. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do these 17 grain ballistic tips first on the right side, which is the side that GoPro's on. In the middle, I'm going to do the FMJ. Sorry, this is the FMJ. Because I'm expecting that to tumble when it can go this way, that way, whatever. So we don't want to put that one on the edge or we risk losing it. We might lose it anyways. If we lose any, we'll take extra shots. And then on the left side, I'll do the 20 grain soft point there. Alright, good hit there. Now we'll do the FMJ in the center. That hit higher than I wanted. We'll probably have to retake that one, find out when we go down there. But now we'll do the 20 grain soft point on the left. That was way easier than the 22 mag videos I've been doing because that 17 is so much more accurate. Just show you the target over here. You might find this interesting. So these are the 17 grain. They're basically hitting dead on for me. And then both 20 grain, the FMJ and the soft point, hitting about 1.5 inches high at 50. We'll see what happens at 100. Ooh, that's closer than I intended. So this was the 17 grain ballistic tip. There was our FMJ, which I was afraid would come out the top, but it does not look like it did, so that's good. Came a little too close here, excuse me, with the 20 grain soft point. I'll probably retake a couple of these, get them to come in low, and we'll flip it over because I don't like how close those are. But I'm seeing pretty devastating damage. Look at that massive cavity. I need to get my tape measure down here too. I'll get that for you guys real quick. When we come back down after these other shots lower. I might just flip it actually. But it both looks like they're really just tearing up the block. So there is your 17 grain. I'm surprised anything's left of that guy sitting right there. We'll get measurements, like I said, when I come back down. Forgot tape measure this time around. FMJ is right there. So it did a lot of damage. It must have tumbled immediately, flipped around. And then you can't even see a line here. That's what a lot of people don't realize. When your bullet is actually going a lower velocity and perfectly straight, it doesn't really do anything. So it started to tear it up just a little bit as it wiggled, came to a stop there. That's pretty good penetration. That's very interesting. I'm glad I'm testing these. If you can keep getting massive damage like that on initial impact, if those tumble reliably, but then get that much penetration, that could be an excellent round for the 17. Then here's your 20 grain, and right there she is. So let me get this flipped over, and I'll try to get a few more better placed shots, one with each again. So I'm not sure yet, but it's probably a good thing we got a good first shot on our first round there with the 17 grain ballistic tip, because I think I put the FMJ right next to it this time around on accident. Okay, not too bad actually. I couldn't really see it through the scope, so I was concerned. There it is there. Still came in higher than I intended, but thankfully again we have a capture. So there's our 17 grain ballistic tip. See, it did break up some more this time. Still got a nice little slug left though, but it's not as large as the first shot. Also, interestingly, the wound cavity here on the second shot, even though it fragmented a little more, it looks like it's a little bit smaller. And then here's our FMJ. Now this is interesting too. FMJ really tore it up last time immediately. This time you got nothing for about 5 or 6 inches. I remember the tape measure this time. And then it did flip and tumble and did all that damage. You know, if you're shooting a ground squirrel, groundhog, rabbit, whatever it may be, that one wouldn't have done jack poopy doopy to him, because it would have been right through him and barely did anything to him because it didn't tumble till this much further in. So unless you were shooting a larger animal, you would have done almost no damage to them whatsoever. So that answers that for me for the FMJ there. It looks like it's going to tumble, but you don't know if it's going to do it immediately or 6 inches in. So that's good to know. And then right there it is next to the other one. I will get measurements here in a second. Oh, that's interesting. So then here's the 20 grain soft point. I've also never seen this before. I've gel tested these before at closer range and they stayed together. It's interesting. There's your wound cavity from that. You can see it carries in a little more damage a little longer, and then basically nothing. And we actually had jacket separation there, which I've never had happen before. Where's our originals down there? So that's probably why this one went so much further. Can you see how much more skinny that projectile is now? Because it shed the jacket, which is almost twice the size. So that's why the original, the first shot with it, didn't go nearly as far, because it stayed together, a much larger piece, so a lot more resistance. This time around, they kind of separated. The jacket made it to here, the lead piece made it to there. So interesting. So again, here's our first shots. You got the 17 grain ballistic tip there. FMJ ended up there. And then see the jacket stayed together on the 20 grain soft point there. Hang on one second here. Get some measurements. All right. First 17 grain ballistic tip went about 6.5 inches. First 20 grain soft point went about 7.5 inches. And then our FMJ from the first shot, about 14 inches of penetration. And again, at the end of the video, guys, I'll have these out and we'll get expanded diameters measured and retained weight as well. Okay. Now on our second set of shots here at 50 yards, 17 grain ballistic tip, about 5 3/4 inch penetration. Right there she is. That 20 grain, because it's separated, jacket went 9.5 roughly. And then what was left of the center of the bullet there, the actual lead portion, went about 12.5. And then our FMJ, about 16 on that one, it looks like. Yep. And that's to the back of the bullet. Looks like we had actually a little bit of bounce back, so it went closer to 17 and bounced back there. So like I said, our first FMJ performed awesome because it just tumbled immediately, whereas the second time around it did not. Also, our first 17 grain, the cavity was much wider here than with the second one. For some reason, about 2.5 inches from there, clear into there. That FMJ, because it tumbled right away, it's about 2 1/4, and it's hard to see what the 20 grain did here because it's just conjoined with that FMJ there. And then our second round, again, much smaller. It's actually a little bit shy of 2 inches there on the 17 grain ballistic tip. About 1 1/4 when it finally tumbled for the FMJ on our second FMJ shot, because it was at a much lower velocity halfway through this block when it finally did tumble. And then that 20 grain there, it looks like about 1.5, the one we can actually see. So the 17 grains are more explosive, as you should expect. But you get a little more penetration with the 20 grain soft point. Now this is 50 yards, so let's see what happens at 100. And of course this one was a fluke. I've never actually seen that happen before, so I don't think that's going to be a common occurrence. If I had more of those, I would take a bunch in here and see how replicable that it was, but I'm down to less than 20 of them, and I got to save them for upcoming gel test comparisons with them. But I'll get these back on the ice here for the transport and my practice shots and getting the camera set up, all that at 100 yards, and then I'll pull them out when we're ready to shoot them. That way they'll keep them nice and cool, get them out of the sun. Again, it's only like 38, 39 degrees, but the sun will heat them up a little bit, but I'll get them back in the cooler with the ice. And then we'll get these shots done at 100 yards and see what happens. All right, and just to show you guys real quick, this is our setup at 100 yards. This is the front where the bullets will be coming in. So we have this mostly unscathed block here. I had to pluck that one out of there, and of course there's all that. But this is what we'll be shooting at here. And interestingly, here's the 17 grainers at 100. So hitting about the same spot as 50. I pulled that shot, so that was my fault. Maybe a hair higher at 100 than 50. And then my 20 grainers, those are original 2 shots at 50, 2 shots at 50. Out here at 100, they're even higher. I pulled that shot, but these 3, and then I probably pulled that shot as well, and then so these 3 here. So yeah, the 20 grainers are still rising at 100 yards, whereas the 17s are pretty much the same spot. So keep that in mind if you switch ammo up. Alright, going to follow the same firing order. 17 grain on the right, 20 grain FMJ in the middle, 20 grain soft point on the left, but this time I got the GoPro on the left side down there. So the closest one you'll see on the GoPro footage is the 20 grain soft point this time instead of the 17 grain ballistic tip. Just wanted to point out to you guys, I just so happened to catch this in frame. The energy dump down here at 100 yards from the 17 grain ballistic tip is still insane. You can see that temporary stretch cavity there when it first hit. It's stretching out not only the top but also the bottom of the block there, like trying to rip the thing in half. So those dump energy really well even down here at 100 yards. Took me a few shots to get this FMJ in the block here. I may be hitting it, I'm not sure. Those might not make much sound when they hit from there, especially if they don't tumble right away, but that one was definitely a hit somewhere. I heard it hit, but I'm not sure where. That was a good hit, except for it was a little far off to the left edge there, so I'm not sure on the capture. All right, let's see what we got here. Okay. So there's our first with the 17 grain ballistic tip. Then I did get the one FMJ there, so I did miss the rest of those. I'm not quite sure where they're going, but I mean, we were having, it was shooting really high in kind of erratic groups there. And then there's the 20 grain there. Did we catch it? I don't know. I have to check. I don't think we did though, so I'll probably have to retake that one. Probably retake that as well. But there's our 17 grain, and it's still mushroom fragmented really well at 100 yards. So let's see what happened with this FMJ here. Touched the table, so yeah, we're definitely gonna have to retake that one as well. And where is that guy? It probably slid out. Let me look at these real quick and then I'll get back with you. Yeah, so we lost the FMJ and the 20 grain soft point. I think the FMJ actually went into the table. But we'll examine the wound channels here real quick. So not doing much down here at 100. You can see it's pretty straight line there, and then it looks like it might have flipped, wobbled, tumbled something there, but not doing nothing at 100. And then there's the 20 grain. Again, you can see it's carrying damage further in than the 17 grain. But again, the 17 grain, larger wound cavity there. And this one did pop out the side there. So we'll retake both of those, no problem. .17 grain ballistic tip, 6 3/4 inches at 100 yards. Very lightly, you can see there is damage clear out there. So that's why I'm measuring from there. About 2 inches on the dot with that coming clear out there. And it's kind of hard to tell because it's a little further in, but you're probably about inch and a quarter on that 20 grain soft point there. But let me retake some shots here, and hopefully we get a capture on the FMJ and the 20 grain soft point. All right, I think I have a better idea of where to aim now, so these should be good hits, at least decently good for 100 yards. So I'm going to put the 20 grain soft point in the middle this time to try and ensure a capture on that. So you know the FMJ, we already know what, other than I guess penetration depth out there at 100, which is probably going to be similar to 50. We already know that's not going to expand or anything like that, so you'll be able to see what it does in the block even if we lose it. So I'm going to put that 20 grain soft point right in the middle to try to capture it. All right, this time the 20 grain soft point unfortunately hit right next to where the first FMJ did. Okay, but we do have a capture, and if you look down in there, it doesn't look like this 20 grain soft point made as much damage as the first one did. You can see the wound channel there. It's a lot smaller. Well, it's kind of, I'll flip it over too, guys. But looking down in there, that almost, it looks like it barely did any more than that FMJ shot right next to it. And then down in here, I can see why, because it didn't expand. The tip is messed up a little bit, but it didn't expand. This one had to have definitely expanded, judging by that giant wound cavity, unless it flipped or tumbled or something. So I'm probably going to try to take another one or two just to try to see if we get one that expands, because that one did not. And then here's the second FMJ I just caught. Interesting results on this one. So up top here is the 17 grain ballistic tip. This is from that 20 grain FMJ. So again, nothing in the first few inches, and then it's decided to flip and tumble. So you get this massive cavity here. And where is our capture? Ah, right there. So we captured it as well. So I think we have pretty definitive results on the FMJ down here. First one didn't do a whole lot, and then we didn't capture it, I think, because it went into the block, or excuse me, the table about right there is where it disappeared. And there's yeah, holes and stuff in the table, so it's probably lined up just right to where it went into one of those holes inside of the table. But that one never did flip, at least not as far as it made it about 9 inches in here before it disappeared. The second one, how far in here? About 4 inches in. It did that flip tumble, got a massive wound cavity. So it's going to be kind of a toss-up with the FMJs, basically like it was at 50, whether it's going to tumble or not. The 17 grain ballistic tip, I think you're always going to get that. I'll try to get another one of these into the block too, just to kind of confirm and verify that. The 20 grain right now, it's looking like it's a toss-up. We don't know if that expanded or if it tumbled and did that. So I want to catch at least one more of those. I'm going to aim for 2. Going to catch at least one more of the 17 grain ballistic tip, because currently don't know what's going to happen. It might be a 50-50 toss-up with that 20 grain there too. And if that one did expand, and that's why it did that, then it's kind of just going to be a 50-50, or you might get expansion, you might not at 100, which would mean it's kind of at the threshold of the furthest effective range as far as it expanding. But that's if this one did that from expanding. We don't know. That's why I want to catch a few more. All right, I got 2 more of the 20 grain soft point in there, and I got 1 of the 17 grain ballistic tip. It's a lot easier with the 17 grain because it's going right, you know, it's zeroed for that one. It's going right where I want it. The 20s I'm guessing on. If I had it zeroed for the 20 grainers at 100 yards, it'd be easy as cake to place the 20 grainers right where I wanted, and then it would be hard to place the 17 grainers. Let me turn this guy off here. Alright, struggling with the GoPro. So yeah, just like before, put the 17 exactly where I wanted, put the other 17 grain right where I wanted. I knew this was going to be right next to that second FMJ that we captured, but I wanted to make sure I left room over here for these 20 grains, so make sure we'd get another capture on those. So, oh, there's freaking 3 holes down here. What do we got? What do we got? Well, I know one of my second, if I could talk, the 17 grain I just took right in here. Where's that guy? Right there, okay. Yep, I'm seeing double there. So that's the second 17 grain. So again, it expanded. We confirmed that. Look what we got here. Of course. So one of the, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but one of the 20 grains is here, captured. The other one's here, captured. Or, no, that other one's the original. That's what's going on. The original one we captured right there. So I hit it with 2 more. That's one of them. Give me a second here. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, this is one of the 20 grains we just caught, soft point. So you can see your wound cavity there. Again, still not as explosive as the 17 grain. Kind of matches this one over here, but not quite as much. But that guy is clear back here. You see the nose of it is blunted a little bit. So I think on this one, again, it's possible it just tumbled or something. But that's pretty streamlined, so I kind of feel like that one just expanded more than these others. So it did a little more damage compared to that. This one down here is one of these shots. So it's kind of hard to see the wound cavity from that because of everything that's going on there. But you can imagine it's about the same looking at that. And it came out the bottom of the freaking block there. So that's why it stopped right there. Otherwise, it probably would have been in here some if it hadn't hit the table there. So these 20 grains soft points, it seems like they're about at the end of their ropes here at 100 yards. Getting some expansion, but not a whole lot. So I got to say 125, 150, you're probably not getting any expansion. So here's a 17 grain here. Ballistic tip. 100 yards. It's just falling apart on me. I'll keep that together because it was together until I tried to pull it out. Sorry if that was off camera there. I was trying to make sure I didn't lose that. So that was together. It just came apart when I pulled it out. There's a little piece of it that came off there too. Of course, we got that 20 grain. Here's the other 17 grain ballistic tip. Right there. That one's staying together for us nice. Those probably, I'm thinking those might still do something at 150, which, by the way, I'll have those videos coming up. A lot of this stuff, at least from the 22 WMR at 100 yards, it's about done for. But some of these 17 HMR rounds still getting expansion at 100, so 150 they might still expand. That'll be a video I'll have coming up eventually. We'll do longer range tests on the ones that are still expanding at 100 to see how far out they'll expand. There's that other 20 grain soft point. Might as well dig our FMJ out here while we're at it. And then the last 20 grain soft point, 100 yards. Seems like pretty consistent performance. So that first one, we either got lucky and it expanded just a little more, or it did tumble or yaw or something, which now seeing these three being pretty similar, I'm thinking that's what happened with the first one, that it tumbled or yawed a little bit. But I don't really know, because those three, they did their thing and stayed straight. They didn't tumble or yaw, so hard to say. I really wish we would have caught that first 20 grain soft point at 100. So there's 17 grain ballistic tip, FMJ. Let's get up there at the bench, check these out, get measurements, weight retention, and all that, and wrap this video up. Real quick before I forget, in an upcoming video, as I said at the beginning of this video, I'll have to do this. I need to get the regular 17 grain ballistic tips that are advertised at 25.50, both Hornady and CCI. Actually, CCI they got their own thing called the VNT now, that they sell in little 50 round packs, which they still advertise at 26.50, just like the A17. So I believe it's the exact same load, but I think they do still make the VMAX 17 grain ballistic tip load, which is a Hornady bullet, but CCI loads it. And that one they only have advertised at 25.50. And then of course the Hornady VMAX is advertised 25.50 with the 17 grain ballistic tip VMAX bullet. So in a future video, I'll have to pit the ones that are advertised 25.50 against the ones that are advertised 26.50 down here to 100, and see if that 100 feet per second makes any difference as far as like expansion and whatnot goes. And then we'll have to do the same at like 150, 200 too, whenever I end up doing those videos. All right, so we'll start out with the guys from 50 yards. Obviously, there's not really going to be much to check with the FMJ. They flattened out a little bit, so you might have a little bit wider width there. Obviously no expansion. Retained weight should obviously be pretty close to the 20 grains. 19.9. So these flattening out help a little bit, we know, when they tumble and yaw, which is why they're flattening out, to do a little more damage there. Oh, I was like 20. Why isn't it 22? I forgot it was a 17. So we are at 0.2000 there, so right on the dot 20 caliber from the side where it flattened out a little bit. It looks like we got 2 of the 17 grain ballistic tip from 50. Retained weight on that one, 10 grains. It's fluctuating a little bit because of the wind out here. See what our measurement is on that from the widest point. 0.3515, 35 cal. Check the other one we got here. 17 grain ballistic tip, 50 yards. That one retained weight 9.6 grains. What's left of it. This guy looks maybe a little wider. Yep, 36. So 36 cal on that. I'll get you guys some close-ups of these in a second as well when we're done getting the weights and measurements. So the 120 grain soft point at 50 yards that actually held together. 19.9 retained, so basically it didn't lose anything. Trying to see, looks like that's the widest angle there, roughly, maybe that. Yeah, there we go. .357, so 35 caliber, 357 Magnum right there, baby. And then this one, the jacket separated 20 grain soft point at 50 yards. See what a retained weight is together. 20.1, so there's probably a little tiny piece of gel on one of those. The lead piece, 13.8 grains. The jacket, 5.9 grains. So obviously the jacket is going to be the widest point there. Yeah, this guy didn't do nearly as much. 0.307, 30 cal on that one. Alright, let me set these aside and we'll check our results at 100. What do we got here? There's the one FMJ at 100, again, no point, and then this one doesn't have any flattening whatsoever. This one's going to be kind of hard to measure. So this was together, if you recall, when I pulled it out, but it came apart on me when I pulled it out. 10 grains on the dot. I don't know that getting a measurement on this really means much because it came apart, but it looks like the lead is actually the largest piece here. .29, 29 caliber. And then here's our other 30 grain. This one got huge just the way that it folded over. At did I say 30 grain? I don't know if that is what I said or not. 17 grain ballistic tip at 100 yards. The wind's messing with this a little bit. Hang on. 14.3 grains retained weight at 100 yards with the 17 grain A17 ballistic tip. This one's going to be .365, 36 cal, and that does look like it's hard to hang on to these little things. I believe that's the widest point, yeah. And let's see, here's our 20 grain. Again, I'll show these up close in a second when we're done here. So one definitely did get a little larger than the rest. I think our retained weight's going to be pretty good on all these. 19.8 to 20 grain bullet. 20 on the dot. And then this widest expanded one, 19.7. So, trying to see which one was the smallest. I guess from the width it doesn't really matter. I think this guy's the smallest expanded that we have, which is less than 17 at the tip. Yep, 1.680, so almost 17 cal there, but the tip actually did not expand as wide as as the bullet actually is at 17 caliber there. Now this one looks like it did make it a little larger than 17 on the tip. Maybe. Yes, okay. 23.6, 23 cal. All right, here's your up close for the 50-yard projectiles. There's our FMJs. There's the 17 grain ballistic tips that we recovered. And there's your 20 grain soft points that we recovered at 50 yards. And now your close up of the projectiles captured at 100 yards. FMJ, 17 grain ballistic tip, and the 20 grain soft points. So, pretty conclusive results today, I think. If you need some penetration, well, obviously you can go with the FMJ. It's going to give you the most penetration, but sometimes those do not tumble until very far into the block. And so, depending on what animal you're trying to harvest, that could be once it's completely out the other side of it, or it might be after it's past the vitals. So you will get maximum penetration with those, but it's kind of up in the air as to whether or not it's going to give you the terminal performance you need on what you're shooting, because it's kind of up in the air. Is it going to tumble right away, or is it going to wait 8 or 9 inches before it tumbles? With that said, I would definitely go with the 20 grain soft points if you're wanting penetration and assured damage. Obviously getting more penetration with those than the 17 grain ballistic tip, although the wound cavity not quite as large initially, but it does carry more damage further before it goes down to a little tiny skinny line. Now if you only need just a few inches of penetration, you want the most damage possible, 17 grain ballistic tip. However, I will say, even if you only need, 4, 5, 6 inches of penetration, depending on what animal you're shooting, if you hit a large arm bone with those may just splash against the bone and then not penetrate past the bone. Like I'm picturing a large, I don't know, 20-pound groundhog. I think some of them weigh that much. They get pretty big out here. If you hit them in the shoulder with that, it may not, kill them at all, let alone humanely, because you might have just bullet splash against that shoulder and not get any penetration into the vitals. So personally, I would still kind of lean towards the 20 grain ballistic tips there. 20 grain soft point, because you get better penetration with those and still pretty darn good damage. Now, if you're shooting something like ground squirrels, obviously penetration is no worry at all, no matter what bone you hit. But at that point, shooting something that small, the 20 grain is still going to get it done anyways. So, but yeah, maximum explosive power there. If penetration is no worry whatsoever, 17 grain ballistic tip. I think the 20 grain soft point is better all around, and you get better penetration with those. And then your FMJs there, it's just kind of up in the air what's going to happen. So, but that's the video today, guys. Like I said, eventually we'll have some longer range videos coming up. 17 HMR, 22 long rifle, and 22 WMR, 22 Magnum, because we're getting some still expanding at 100. So we got to see how far out they'll still expand. I have more 17 coming up. Like I said, I really want to test the slower 2550 advertised ballistic tip 17 grainers against these faster ones from CCI, see if there's any difference at 100 and then also 150 when we eventually do that. I got these TNTs here that are supposed to be real explosive, probably will only penetrate like 3 inches. I'll have these coming up in a video. I still got a ton of 22 long rifle coming up I got to get to, but for everything you missed so far, check out the 22/rimfire playlist on the channel. I'll have all the rimfire gel tests in there, firearm reviews, long range shooting and whatnot, like I said. Oh, if you want to get yourself one of these caliper scale shooting bag there, target stand to use, paper targets, steel targets, and way more, links in the description for all that. Again, link in the description for the original review video on this rifle if you want to check that out. Like I said earlier, I also got that guy out to 500 yards accurately. I got a little 300 and 400 yard video on it too. Again, check out the 22/rimfire playlist on the channel for that. But stay tuned, I'll have a lot more coming. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to catch you on the next one.